Okay, I'm live. I'll continue reading chapter 10, entitled Ray of Many Lifetimes. This is a collaboration between Joan Marshall Grant and Denys Kelsey. Joan passed away in 1989. This was published in 1967 by Denys and Joan. This here is Denys describing their friend Ray. Ray. She is very ill, and we are continuing in the chapter which ended. She says she felt exactly the same urge to leave everything in order when she was preparing for the birth of a baby. Next morning, Ray told us that she had slept very well and knew that she was not going to die yet because she had again dreamt of the river, and it was much wider. Instead of it being so narrow that I could easily jump across it, the banks have become reedy and muddy. The only time I get scared is when I think I might get stuck in the mud. Can you promise this won't happen? We both gave her our most heartfelt assurance that when she decided that she wanted to discard her body, she should have every assistance she needed. Joan then again told her the technique she must practice. This was to shift level, which I found could help her to do with hypnosis, and then visualize herself crossing the river, each time leaving a little more of her vital energies on the far bank. Remember that there is nothing you can do on this side that you cannot do much better on the other. You enjoy skiing, so while you are asleep this afternoon, think of the finest ski slopes you have ever seen, and you will see that you have been skiing better and faster than you have ever dared to imagine. When we came back after Ray had slept, she told us it worked beautifully. I skied so much better than I've ever done down here. Splendid fast Christies, and I went soaring over some jumps. She stayed in hospital another 2 days so as to have the pericardial effusion tapped, which, although the sac would soon fill up again, caused a temporary improvement. At her suggestion, a hospital bed, which would make nursing her more easy, was put into the drawing room from which she could look into the garden through the three French windows. Friends who arrived at the house, apprehensive at the thought of talking to a woman who knew she was dying, relaxed within a couple of minutes and were soon talking freely, laughing, drinking whiskey or sharing Jane's Ray's champagne, as though nothing could be more natural than she should be discussing her imminent departure to a country to which she longed to return. It was decided not to repeat the tapping of the pericardium because sudden cardiac arrest would be preferable to the respiratory failure which could not be long delayed. By now only the tip of her remaining lung was functioning. Yet she continued to laugh and talk and read, to sort out the papers which crammed the drawers of two desks, dictate letters. She decided to have a memorial service which will give my friends a chance to meet each other, and left instructions for her body to be cremated, with no one there except the professionals. A river flows through her village, and she wished her ashes to be scattered from the bridge. Although her physical reserves were so slight that it was an effort to reach for a glass or a powder compact from the table beside her bed, her peace of mind made the control of her symptoms by hypnosis so effective that she required only minimal doses of analgesic drugs, an occasional tablet of codeine to control a spasm of coughing, and a modest dose of barbiturate at night. If she had a twinge of pain, which was not within call, and I was not within call, she could switch it off by swinging a brass clock key on a piece of ribbon, this being the trigger object which I had chosen, merely because it had happened to be on the mantelpiece and was a convenient size. Every afternoon I helped her to practice dying. I would induce the extreme depths of hypnosis, and she would describe what she was seeing on the other side of the river. She was always enchanted by the extraordinary beauty of the scenery, the lakes in which she could swim so freely under water, the mountains she climbed with such ease, the garden in which flowers grew without being regimented by the seasons. I asked her whether there was anything I could do to make her crossing easier. Without a second hesitation, she said, I shall just step across. I know this is true, for the river has become so narrow it is only a little stream. I told her to sleep, and when her breathing had changed to a slow, peaceful rhythm, I left the room. I wanted to warn Joan that I thought Ray might not wake again. Joan had gone back to the cottage, and I found her sitting on the bed with her hands pressed in her temples. She glanced up. Listen, it's very important. Something is going wrong inside Ray's head. I got an echo of it during lunch, which is why I bolted back up here instead of going to see her. I can often manage to deflect her pain, but this head pain is so terrible that I doubt if I would be able to do anything about it. Joan had no inkling that Peter and I had both been only too well aware that Ray might possibly develop secondaries within her skull, which could cause extreme pain, and when I talked with Pete, he accepted without question, as I had done, the validity of Joan's hunch. While I was talking with him, Joan was with Ray. Then she joined us and said, Ray has told me that she knows she will stay alive as long as we are here with her. She wants us to go back to France the day after tomorrow by the night boat. She's going to ask Peter to be with her when we leave and stay with her until she is very far out, and then she thinks she will be able to cross the channel with us. I will most certainly do so, said Peter, and my Joan will come to her early the next morning. Peter's wife is also called Joan and shares his qualities. I can pay her no greater or more sincere tribute. The next day, Ray was feeling so well that she thought there must have been a mistake in the x-rays. Before I could remind her that these were confirmed by Peter's daily examination of her chest, she picked up the hand mirror and studied her lovely face attentively. I can't really be on my deathbed when I haven't any discomfort. My hair hasn't gone dark, dank. It's lucky. I'm a genuine blonde, or I would have gone dark at the roots by now, and my skin is all right, and my nails have never looked better, even if my fingers have gone numb. I'm very wobbly if I try to stand, but who wouldn't be after being so long in bed? Do you realize it's 3 weeks today since they carted me off to the hospital? About half an hour later, she suddenly gasped and clutched her side. She had an acute pain in her chest, which hypnosis did not relieve. I was about to give her an injection of pethidine when Joan took Ray's hand and said, Listen, darling, you're giving yourself this pain to prove that there hasn't been some ghastly medical muddle. To prove that there hasn't been some ghastly medical muddle. It is totally unnecessary, so switch it off at once. In a couple of minutes, Ray relaxed and lay back on her pillows. Thank God it has gone. A day or two of pain like that, and I should be crazy. It was very understandable that she should have sought this assurance, except during the moments of exhaustion evoked by any change of position. It was difficult even for Peter and me to realize that she was a dying woman. Only lingering anxiety had been that, as no one she loved had already died, she might feel lonely. But by now she had several times remembered with a man whom she described as one of my special people, whom she thought she had first known when they were both Greek. She knew also that she would soon meet not only her own loves of long years, but the people to whom Joan and I had been linked through the centuries by affection. On the last day she said again, I believe that dying has been the most important thing I have done in my life. It seems to have made so many people less frightened. I'm so very glad that you have promised to hand it on by writing about me, and I'll try to help. Of our parting, I will say only that the three of us shared a poignant sorrow and a profound peace which I had not previously known could exist. I had expected that we would be conscious of Ray on the boat that night, but although I slept deeply and Joan remained wide awake, trying to shift level, neither of us could make contact with her. The following morning, after we had been driving south for about 2 hours, we were both vividly conscious that Ray was also in the car, but the awareness faded after a few minutes. During the early afternoon, Joan, who was driving, suddenly stopped the car, saying, "Don't worry about me, I must be alone for a few minutes." She came back looking preoccupied and said that she was not yet sure whether we should go to our favorite hotel at Chaumont on the south bank of the Loire or stay on the north bank in Blois. It was sunset when we reached the river. Again, Joan stopped the car. Then she said steadily, although I knew she was close to tears, "It's all right now, we can go to Chaumont." She did not have to tell me that we could cross the Loire because Ray had already crossed her river. As soon as we had gone up to our room, we put a trunk call through to Peter. He told us that before he had given Ray an injection to ensure that she slept, she had talked to him for about an hour. Her serenity, her assurance of the happiness she was soon to find, had been the culmination of 3 weeks in which she had given him and his wife something of inestimable value, which they would treasure all their lives. Ray had slept until late the following morning, but then woke to say regretfully to Peter's Joan, who was already with her, "I'm still here, and I tried so hard not to come back." When Peter arrived, she was having a paroxysm of coughing, so I gave her another injection. They both stayed with her while she slept, and the only time she opened her eyes was to say, "They are watching for me, they're waiting for me. They are all smiling, and they have such happiness in their faces." At 4:15 her heart stopped beating. This confirmation brought us joy and relief, which was overwhelming. A joy shared by Ray, for suddenly she was with us, free and radiantly happy. She could hardly have been more perceptible if she had still been using a physical body. Although I had empirical evidence of the ease with which thoughts can be exchanged between people who are functioning on different levels of reality. When Joan perched on my knee and dictated extremely useful material while her body was under anesthetic, I had assumed that Ray would help me to write about her by causing me to have flashes of insight or lucid dreams. But on the 29th of October, while I was discussing with Joan which extracts to use from my very detailed case notes, she said, "As Ray is here, why don't you ask her?" I protested that this was her expertise rather than mine, but Joan insisted that it would be easier for Ray to get ideas through to me because of the link we had already established through the use of hypnosis. I decided to try the technique which, as I have already mentioned, I sometimes use during a session to increase the free flow of intuition. This consists in closing my eyes, withdrawing attention from sensory stimuli, and shutting out ideas which stem only from my intellect. A patient seldom realizes that I am doing what I am doing, though there have been occasions when it took more than a couple of minutes, and he has inquired with solicitude or resentment whether I had fallen asleep. As only Joan was present, I was able to increase the ease of relaxation by lying full length on the sofa. As I knew a level shift which lasts for more than a few minutes is likely to produce a marked drop in body temperature, I covered my legs with a rug. I was doubtful that I would be able to make any contact with Ray. I had not been aware of her presence, but within seconds I knew she was here. I signed to Joan to ask me a question. "What does Ray wish us to write about her?" The answer came immediately. "What fun it is to die! Dying is not at all solemn. It's not even the sadness I expected at being physically parted. I can always make contact with the upstairs part of you. So for me, there is no feeling of separation. It's not nearly so easy for you because sometimes you can't remember that we have been together. What was dying like? Just what I expected, crossing a river which had become so small a stream that I could literally step across it. There was no sense of strangeness, for I had been to the river so often when we were practicing. There was nothing to fear because I had seen the beautiful country before I came back to it. You and Joan knew what you told me was true. You could not have been nearly so helpful if you had only hoped that it might be. Remembering some of your own lives help you. It only confirmed what I already knew. I was convinced that I had lived many times the moment you reminded me years ago about reincarnation. It seemed so obvious even then, I could not have doubted it even if I had wished to. There were so many people to welcome me. I had forgotten how many people I had loved and still loved, even though I had not seen them for centuries. I had a clear visual impression of Ray, although my eyes were closed. I could see her sitting on the arm of the sofa. I could not hear her voice, but the communication was as clear as the words were being dictated, words which I had repeated so that they would be registered by the tape recorder. Within a few minutes, within a few days, it had become almost as natural to say, "Why not ask Ray?" as it would have been to suggest consulting her by telephone. I could seldom keep a clear contact for more than half an hour, and when I felt unable to condense her thoughts into words without hesitation, or if my visual impression of her was becoming hazy, I told Joan to turn off the tape recorder. Sometimes my awareness of her would fade gradually. Sometimes it ended as abruptly as though a television set had been switched off. I found that contact was either established very quickly, within a couple of minutes, or that there was none at all. I've had completely negative results on about half of the occasions when I have induced a level shift in order to ask some specific question. And on these, however hard I tried to visualize her, or to make myself believe that she was present, such efforts proved entirely ineffective. There have been many times when Joan or I, or both of us, simultaneously have realized that Ray was with us, even though we had not been thinking about her for several days. For instance, we were having dinner in the buffet of Brive railway station when meeting visitors who were arriving by the Paris Express, when I suddenly realized that she was sitting in the empty chair at the table. She wanted me to tell the young man who was dining with us how grateful she had been that he had driven half across England to see her before she died. At Ray's suggestion, I have included only the questions and her replies, which are relevant to this book. These occurred in the course of 7 different sessions. In nearly every session, she repeated, "Tell them how easy it is to die. If you can remind them that they have had many lives, they will know that there is no need to fear dying. Why was it so easy for you to get out of your body?" I had no fear of shedding it. I knew it should be shed quickly, because the cancer was spreading so fast that nothing could have prevented me from feeling pain much longer. I think Joan knew it was starting in my head. My body would soon have become a barrier between me and the people I loved. There is no point in keeping a body which is no longer a useful means of expressing the rest of oneself. Even 2 more days would have made it difficult for me to leave smoothly. Why would pain have made it more difficult to die? I should have thought that pain would have made death even more welcome. Pain, not death, is always the enemy. Pain wastes the energy which, when it can no longer be used for healing the body, is needed to get out of it. Pain can so easily become confused with a simple little act of dying. There's nothing to be gained through pain. It is this pain, the futile suffering, which has caused so many people to fear death. If you had no fear of death, why did you have the x-rays? Because I didn't want to leave the people I loved, especially when I was learning how to be useful. I had forgotten that I could be far more useful up here than I was when I had to filter everything I knew through my intellect. On this level, it is so much easier to make people understand that I'm trying to help them and not just being bossy. What kind of work are you doing? Helping to rescue ghosts, showing people how easy it is to cross the river, and trying to make them wake up in the morning knowing that they can stop being so silly. If you had not rescued your ghosts before you died, would you have had to come back here to do so? I need not have been born again, but I would probably have gone on refusing to acknowledge their existence while I was up here. I was too ashamed to bring them with me to this side of the river. Ghosts are very like discreditable relatives that one tries to disown. I could not have ignored them indefinitely because they had to come home before I could be a whole person. This is difficult to translate into words. I used to mean Ray. Now it means all the experience incarnate and excarnate, which adds up to what up here I mean when I think of myself as me. Could you have freed your ghosts while you were down here unless you had been able to remember them? Of course I could. They would have started to become free whenever I chose to change the direction of the energy which was keeping them imprisoned. It was not essential to remember them. It helped a very great deal, more than I think you realize. When I could no longer disown them, I knew it was too squalid to cling to my false pride any longer, too snobbish to pretend that they did not exist. Pride was the source of all my ghosts. I refused to admit that the people I could have helped turned against me because I despised them. I refused to admit that I looked after the lepers only because they provided me with a convenient penance. I refused to admit that I left a brave man to die in pain only because I had not the courage to set him free of his body. Why did you take so long to forgive your ghosts? Because I could forgive them. Before I could forgive them, I had to forgive myself. It was much easier to punish myself, but all that the self-punishment did was to feed my false pride. Self-punishing, self-punishing often drives people to shrive their guilt by inflicting on themselves the misery they have caused. And this was never done. It has never done anyone any good. It only adds to the sum of suffering. It is so sad and so silly. Who decides whether or when you will come back here again? Me. You both know this perfectly well. No one is ever sent into incarnation. We are born either because we want to be able to hide our unlovable traits from other people, and even from ourselves, or because we have volunteered to try to make the pattern come true on the downstairs level. Why do so few down here people know about the beautiful country? Because they are blinded by the aspects of themselves which have never been here, which could not come up here because they relish rage and hatred, or wanted to continue making someone else feel small, or gloated over possessions, or believed they could own people. And a part of their upstairs self, which has gone back to try to educate the delinquent aspects, find it difficult enough to be in exile without remembering the contrast between up here and down there. Remembering would make them even more homesick. It is now the 20th of February 1967. I have not talked with Ray for 10 days. At the close of our last session, he said, I'm not going to answer any more questions until you have finished the book. I have already told you what I want you to say about me. Tell them how easy it is to cross the river. Tell them there is no loneliness up here and so much joy to share. Hand on what we all know to be true. We have tried to do so. Right, that is the end of this lovely many lifetimes. Enjoy Sunday, 6th of October 2025.